Today's Diana Prince is Sierra Henley Ashburn, the passionate founder of Amplified Innovation, an operations company that partners with female founders. Her zone of genius is operations strategy, and new ideas and collaborations light her up. She crafts strategic, well-defined operation plans that help leaders execute tasks. She is also a fierce, loving, homeschooling mother of 5, a wife to a guy she met on a school bus back in middle school, and she's a free spirit, but her feet are steady on the ground. And she's also a foodie and a traveler.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
I know that you do operations, and I'm hoping that you can give us a little more background on what that entails. When you say operations, what are we talking about? Are we talking about processes? Can you explain a little about
Absolutely.
what you do?
So we come alongside female partners and partner with them and founders, and we help create the vision that's in their head and bring it to life in terms of those operational pieces of how are things running, right? Like when you're a founder, you're wearing all those hats. So we put that together so they can really build a team and scale and build a lifestyle and a business that's reflective of the essence of who they are and all that they're wanting to do. So yes, that's the process and procedures. That's your workflows, your documentation of your SOPs so that you can really ensure what lives in your head comes out in a way that your team can be empowered and learn from, and that your client experience that you're creating aligns with the overall vision and mission of your business and who you are.
Okay. Does it include any system setup?
Yeah, so we will cover system setup in terms of the back end and what you would use like on the day-to-day pieces of your CRM, your project management system, different things like that to really help, you do what you need to do with ease. Like we're very focused on, your zone of genius and how do we implement systems and processes and team members and outsource support so that you can really be elevated to operate in your zone of genius. So we're going to put in systems that make sense for your business, the season that you're in, and your deliverables of what you're giving for clients. And that feels good. Not overly techy, not overly complicated. Like we're not looking to cause a ruckus and create chaos. It really is, what do we need here to streamline it and create ease?
Yeah. And I, as a small business owner, I can definitely talk about how overwhelming it could be to set that up on your own.
Absolutely. And each piece builds upon the next
business owners tend to overcome things.
We're in our head and we wear a lot of hats on the front end, right? It's a lot of hats and you do a lot of different things and you learn to do stuff on the fly. And then eventually you graduate to a place of, okay, this is a piece of it that I didn't sign up for. And that component of, do I need some help here? And so there's a big piece of what we do of encouraging founders that you get a choice and you do have access to help. You don't get to earn that. It's not something you earn. You're already worthy of that support to come in alongside you and bring you to that next step and help you along the way. It's independent. It doesn't mean alone. So we're here together.
Yeah. Awesome. So how did you get into this line of business? Where did the idea
So
come
originally
from?
I was in a position prior to launching Amplified 5 years ago, where I was in a heavily admin-based role. And I was in these positions where I was helping founders with the admin piece of it. Admin is so very important, right? The doing, we all need doers and we all need to get things done. That's a piece of it. But I was quickly that I naturally would build plans and then do the documentation along the way. And I was gravitating towards that. And with that, I was able to identify these founders had gaps, right? Yes, you have all the action, but if you don't have a plan as the foundation to really guide, then you lead with those gaps versus solutions. And so the plan lets you just have the trust and to really delegate and thrive in that zone of genius without worrying about just who's doing what and when and becoming the assigner of the task rather than the founder and the CEO.
Let's follow up on what you just said with regards to admin. How are operations different than the administrative tasks?
So the admin is the integration piece, and our team does cover the integration piece, but we make sure you have that plan in place first. And there's a lot of virtual assistant support that is out there that can be really helpful and supportive to business owners. I always still encourage having a strategic plan, whether you utilize someone like myself to build the plan and you already have a great doer on your team to execute the task. You still need both. It's very much is a both situation. It's not either or, but the admin support goes so much further, is so much more effective and empowering and supportive of the day-to-day pieces for a founder and a whole team if that operations plan is properly in place and that time has been invested on the ops side of things.
So I just want to make sure that we are understanding when we're talking about admin, you're talking about if you have obviously a VA or something like that. Obviously is that what we're referring to?
So like the admin piece and that side of it, of the daily doing of like email checks and client responses and importing information to systems, right? Is like all of that is the actual doing of what does the operations, like how does it live on the day to day? And without the plan, then you get in a place of who's doing what, how are they doing what? And if you don't have the operations, then you have that open-endedness, right? Oh. They're not empowered. You bring on a VA and you're like, oh, I want you to do this. But really, you've been doing it yourself. You have it in your head of how you've been doing it, what looks like.
If you don't have the operations piece as to how everything kind of ties together and a strategy, you may be working harder than
founders that end up where you just swap one job for another. You might not be doing the task anymore, but you're managing who's doing the task versus empowering them to work in their magic and serve you well. And delegation is always something to celebrate, but eventually you're going to spin out your wheels of just giving assigned tasks versus there's a plan. And that plan of operations include how and what everyone else is doing to support you, and what are you going to do with that capacity that's now open? Where do you go with your time as the founder and CEO to utilize your strengths to really step back into why you started your business to begin with? And then how you can serve and what is your piece on the day to that is supportive to your team, not an additional job or more work, because there is a piece where founders do get caught up in if they just hire a virtual assistant where they just become the manager versus even though they're not doing the task anymore. And that can be a dead spot and create a space where, oh, did it really benefit me to outsource? And I never want a founder to feel like they're questioning whether or not support was truly supported, because it can be, it should be, it's supposed to be. But the piece is that gap is the operations. If you don't have a plan, because the plan takes in consideration of who you are, your values, right? Like it's bringing all of that in of what you want to create and your full vision.
Gotcha.
And yes, it's task doing, but most of us are here because we're on fire for what we're doing and we're creating good things and doing good things and we want to do it. And so having the right people in the right seats to do that in a way that feels good, that's where the operation plays in.
And you also mentioned something with regards to the documentation piece of it, which whether you're doing the admin yourself right now or whether you have a VA doing the admin for you, that having that documentation is important because, first of all, if you don't have an admin yet, you need the documentation to train them. They need to oversee how your business functions. And then, of course, if you do have an admin now, a VA, having that documentation helps you with any transition.
It's an asset that is valuable to you and stays with you and grows as you grow your team. Because when you're creating those assets of documentation, you are hopefully doing it from a place where you're considering different learning styles of how do you empower someone that thrives on videos or thrives on written documentation or screenshots, or you have this collaborative piece of documentation. And then when you do have someone else other than yourself complete the task, they put their spin on it, right? Everybody's got their own process. And then you can come back to that documentation and further revise it and develop it from a place of another perspective, more insight of something somebody else may have called that when you were doing the task and you created the documentation initially, you were on autopilot doing that, right? And so we spend a lot of time getting you out of the autopilot stage into the documentation because business owners can be like, oh, that's 5 steps, but really there's 3 baby steps.
Oh, but wait a minute. I got to send out, I got to send out this email. I got to send out 20
those baby steps in between.
Whatever that
and then they're in.
Try to write it down.
You got to write it down. And that's what I say. Write it down any way you can. It doesn't have to make sense. Just start writing it down. Start recording yourself. It all to that asset.
Well, I come from corporate backgrounds. Are you from
a little bit? Yep. I have some background where
you get the SOPs in a corporate environment. Mine have now landed on Canva as a flow chart right now because it's easier than sitting there writing all of that.
Yeah.
down.
And that's you
But,
honoring your
I
process.
definitely have an appreciation for it.
That's you honoring your process, right? Honoring the way you receive the information and the way it makes sense. And corporate doesn't hold space for that. But you and your own business, you're like, oh, it's scary. It's not as intimidating.
You can do it.
Because you can make it.
It's pretty. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I think you could have a little bit more fun have a few more colors on your document as a business owner.
Yes.
But I do remember those painful SOPs from my corporate days. I want to give you an opportunity to just elaborate on how operations play into your goal of building a non-toxic workplace. Can you give us a little bit more on that?
It's so important. Non-toxic workplace was the reason why I started Amplified, and how can I create that for other women to utilize their skill sets and utilize their brains in a way that brings them joy without self-sacrifice? And how do we help other founders do the same thing, right? That there's so much good work being done by so many out here with small businesses and solopreneurs, and they're growing. And with that, you have a level of intention. And in order to do that in a way that they are building team and opportunity and supporting their clients, there's a level of intention around that non-toxic workplace component that I feel like is so important from so many I talk to. And you build that with intention. And that intention is like what is needed, like to start cultivating like that workspace. And then for both yourself and your team, and then gives a chance to reflect on the essence of you, your values, your vision, and like the build of the foundation that's considered of each of those components. This is going to streamline into your workflows because they're detailed and clear. Your training materials, right? That are various styles and learning styles. Is you're being inclusive with your approach. You're being considerate, and you're taking that time. You're taking that effort. Your project plans are going to allow for team focus and client deliverables in a way that builds trust and ensures that like all people are treated well and everyone's given a chance to be seen and heard and shine. So that piece is of how you're creating that process, how you're documenting that SOP. It's not like sterile from the corporate world. It's inclusive of here, give us your feedback, ask questions, right? How you're creating that space for your team starts with the operations pieces, because that's what you have when you bring them on, when you include them in your vision to create this space for your clients. And like that just fully goes into the value piece of it, and like how your values are so important then as you're building the operations too.
Maybe we transitioned over to small business owners, or we've always been business owners, but the main part of why we do it is the fact that we want the freedom to work the way we want. So that's wonderful that you can create that tailored to each group, which is
it's
great.
Very customized. It's definitely not like a cookie cutter approach. It's very customized to you and who you are and what your goals are and how you want to achieve them and what you want to hold dear to you from that value concept standpoint along the way. And like in meeting you where you are, it's a very meet you where you are approach that I think just honors the process and the journey, right? It's not just about the deliverable and the outcome, but that you feel good while you're doing it. Yeah. It is so important. It's a key layer into building everything out because there's so much that lives inside of us, right? When it's mapped out internally, like our operations, and we consider our values in that piece, that's a starting point where it flows out to the clients externally and that experience for clients that we create, right? For example, if communication and relationships are high on your value list, it's going to be reflected in those processes and your workflows because they're going to set to always be in question. Does this step honor the importance of communication and relationship? Well, my role and that of my team members also who are going to be a part of these steps, is it going to highlight the values in a way that clients can see and feel what we value as a company in relationship to them, and that it's held at such a high regard. And then of course, these components are going to layer in to your hiring for each role, your system choices that you bring in, the mapping of like your contracts and agreements. So it's like even the high level pieces down to the day-to-day interactions, those values like slowly align all the way through each step. And if you start early with the operations of this is how I want to build team, this is how I want to ensure every project has this consideration, that everyone's who's contributing, that my client feels seen and heard, my team members feel seen and heard. If that's of high importance, then that's always going to be a consideration of each process that you put in place for your entire operations. As small as it is, including email responses and your auto replies, all the way down to client deliverables and how that's packaged and presented to them, and that follow-up and care to be sure that they understood and got everything that they needed. Each step, all the way through. It lives like the values live in it.
So the client-facing piece of it, I get it. When we're talking about more of the internal stuff, and you said something with the software that you select, obviously, I just never really thought of the fact that your values, but it is true. Like I said, my SOPs right now exist on Canva. That's freedom I have right now. And guess what? I like the color and I like the pictures and I like the fact that I can have it in there. But I never thought of that as speaking to values, but it actually makes sense. Is okay. This is where I want to work. This is a better environment for me than working through an Excel spreadsheet, because I have an issue with Excel spreadsheets because I work with them for so long.
And and other people are going to see it and feel it, right? Whether they be whether they're helping you with operations or their virtual assistant, or even if they're in your world for finance or in your world for marketing, well, you can identify like that you want it to feel like this, right? This is how you want it to look, and this is how you digest information. You can provide that information to other service providers to support you better and provide it to your team. And then they can kick that back to you. Oh, I like visuals and the audio helps me, right? Like different things like that, so that you're growing, you're learning, your values are not just yours, but also considerate of everyone else. And how do we encompass this and inclusive? And that's going back to that non-toxic workplace of how we're building up like this so that it's real. And we're setting as an example of how we operate in operations so that other clients in whatever their field may be can go and do the same thing. And hopefully, again, it's a ripple effect, right? We're here because usually there was something we didn't like of whatever we left before, and we're trying to do it different and try to do it better. We can't control everything. We can't change everything, and we can't always do it on a mass scale, but each of these choices layer in to the good that we're doing for each other and ourselves, just so it's just more easeful.
I want to just pivot a little because I want to get the background on who Sierra Henley is. You mentioned that you always wanted to live on a farm. Tell me about
So I'm a manifesting generator, and I didn't know that, of course, as a kid, but there was a lot of things I wanted to be when I grew up, and there's still a lot of things I want to be when I grow up. It's, like I have a list, and having a farm and being on a farm was one thing I wanted. I didn't know how that was going to look or what it was going to be or necessarily how I was going to get there. But I just got here as fast as I could. So we have just under 7 acres, about an hour east outside of Nashville. So we are growing and developing the farm, and it's super exciting. We raise our 5 kiddos here, and I love it, and I'm so grateful. And I get to see the stars and the moon very clearly. We're definitely not where the people are, and that fills up my cup in that way on the day-to-day basis. It's a lot more quiet, and I'm grateful.
You mentioned you're a foodie. I am also a foodie. So let me know, what's your favorite places to get your recipes?
So when I'm at home and I'm cooking and preparing, and I used to not cook, and I used to think I would never cook either, but I also learned that as much as I love food, I needed accessibility to those foods at home. And so I'm a big watcher of videos. So that's one thing in terms of my scrolling. It's travel places. If it's not operations and like human design and self-development, my kids know it's like food. Food is a big piece of that. And they're like, Mom, there's always another video. And I was like, yes, I know. And I'm like, we're going to try this one next. So I think that's a way that I receive the content very easily versus reading in a cookbook. I can watch the video, screenshot the recipe, grab what I need, and keep it moving, and then save it to reference later. I'm always going back to it because I'm minimalist at heart, and so I don't like printing things. I don't like having the clutter. So
there isn't a specific show that you watch. You really just dive into which, you just pull up whatever you feel like.
Yeah, like whatever I scroll and see. I think it's like my sacred response too of, oh, that sounds good. And it's, yes, I want that. And so if that's what it ends up being, or I love to save that for later, and then I save it.
I want to thank you for joining me here on Diana Prince. And if you want to learn more about Sierra and Amplified Innovation, be sure to visit her website shown in the description. For now, stay curious, stay inspired, and keep seeking out extraordinary stories. Until next time, this is Angela Acosta signing off.